Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure, sure. My pleasure.
I love this movie. I love this book. I love this story.
Hmm.
So, for you, I've got to know, how did it feel when you found out your book was going to be made into a DreamWorks movie? Like, not just a movie.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that DreamWorks actually, they knew I was working on the book before I had even finished writing it. They have people who pay attention to like kids publishing and they kind of like checking out what different authors are up to. And so they knew I was working on a book about a robot in the wilderness while I was writing it. And so they
Wow.
actually approached me before I even finished it. They wanted me to send them an unfinished version of the story, but I refused because I wanted to make sure I was like, I didn't want to screw this up by sending them something that's not very good. So I said, you guys have to wait until I'm ready. I'm happy with it. So they waited. And then as soon as I finished the manuscript, we sent them a copy and they almost immediately made me an offer to adapt it into a film. Now, I should say that what they offered me was the film option, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't guarantee the movie is going to get made. And so for years, a few years went by and nothing had happened with it. And so I was starting to wonder if maybe the movie wasn't going to happen after all. And then they signed up Chris Sanders, the director. And once he got on board, I was like, okay, not only is this movie definitely going to happen, but it's going to be good because Chris
Yeah.
Sanders is so good at what he does as directing How to Train Your Dragon movies and Lilo and Stitch and many others. He was involved in a lot of classic Disney movies. Um, and so I felt like at that point, I felt very optimistic and very, uh, I was actually kind of relieved. That might be their actual feeling, was like, okay, good. I was like, okay, this is going to be good. Chris is involved. This is going to be really good. So that's kind of how it all happened.
Yeah. Last thing you want is for it to end up being a bad movie. You'll be like, hey,
I mean, I guess I'd take a bad movie over no movie. I don't know.
that's true.
Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But certainly it was quite I was very happy to learn that
Yeah.
Chris was involved. And then obviously the finished movie turned out to surpass even my high expectations.
Yeah. What was your reaction when you first saw it? Because this movie, it's so beautiful. The animation is like something we've never seen before.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. I mean, they kind of invented this whole process of getting this painterly illustrative background effect. Um, the movie is gorgeous. The story is, of course, beautiful, and um, I don't know. I was really overwhelmed. The first time I saw the finished film was at the world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. I had had a really busy few weeks. They had sent me, I had an opportunity to watch a finished film version beforehand, but it just didn't happen. And so there I am sitting at the film festival alongside, you know, Chris Sanders and Lupita Nyong'o and Mark Hamill and Catherine O'Hara and Chris Bowers. Like I couldn't believe what was happening. It was very surreal. So I honestly, I had to watch the movie a few times before it really kind of sunk in
Yeah.
because that first time sitting in that audience with those people, I was just buzzing from excitement. It was really a lot. It was a lot to process.
I can imagine. I've seen the movie 4 times now. I just
Cool.
watched it the fourth time this weekend. And it makes me cry every
Yeah,
single time, as a mom,
that's
especially.
great. Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
yeah. Thanks for making me sob.
Well, I wanted that to happen. When I
Yeah.
wrote the book, it was really important to me to not sugarcoat things for readers. I wanted to be real about how life in the wilderness is tough. I wanted to be real about how are tough, right? Like being a member of and they have obviously a very unique, unusual family, Roz, the robot, and Bright Bill, the goose, her son. Um, but we find them going through some pretty relatable situations, struggles that a lot of families go through, especially small families and maybe single parent families. And so I was so happy that the movie makes people feel these strong emotions because that was such an important ingredient in the books for me personally. So to have that carry through to the movie was, I mean, it would have felt wrong if the movie
Yeah.
hadn't captured those emotions, but they did it so beautifully. And to sit in a movie theater and listen to people cry at all the
Yeah.
right moments, it just felt so gratifying.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've seen it, we're all sobbing. Like,
Yeah.
I saw it at a festival. It's called Fantastic Fest in Austin, which is genre stuff. It's usually all horror stuff. And people went and saw it, and everyone was sobbing there. So, like, it has an
Wow.
audience. I feel like it reaches everybody. Everybody can relate to this movie.
Well,
Um,
that's exactly right. It's a family movie in the true sense of the word. It's got something for every member of the family at different ages, right? Older, like parents, grandparents, kids, like everybody has a way to kind of really get sucked into the story, a character, a scene, whatever it is. And so I'm quite proud that the film was able to capture that sense of I don't know, just creating a story that is so universal and can appeal to so many different people in different ways.
Yeah, where did your inspiration for this story come from?
Well, it started with my kind of love of science and technology and nature. And I ended up I drew a picture of a robot in a tree one day. I'm an author and an illustrator, so I sketch a lot of silly stuff. And one day I drew a picture of a robot in a tree, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I started researching robotics and artificial intelligence and nature and animal behavior and ecology and learning a lot of really interesting stuff about all those subjects. And I realized that a story about a robot learning to survive in the wilderness and then going on to not just survive, but to really thrive and to become an integral part of this sort of community of wild creatures. A robot who ends up becoming almost more natural and wild than a person ever could. That's a pretty interesting story. And so it took me years, but I stuck with it, and I eventually wrote the first book in this, what is now a 3-book series about Roz the robot out in the wilderness. And yeah, it's been kind of a dream come true, this whole situation.
Well, speaking of there being 3 books, I know there's potential to have more movies, which I think, I mean, I know I want it. So for people who haven't read the rest of the books, what would you tease for Roz's future?
So the first book is about Roz learning to sort of survive in the wilderness and developing all these surprising relationships and family and friends, and really a home for herself in the wilderness. The second book, The Wild Robot Escapes, is about Roz then finding herself in civilization, which is where she was meant to be, around people and technology and other robots. But she's still kind of wild on the inside, and so she has to she has to walk this line of not letting her true self out, because if people realize that she can speak with animals and she's lived in the wilderness and she's had a family and friends, they'll probably think there's something wrong with her and they'll want to kind of reprogram her. And so she's really kind of stuck between these two worlds, and trying to figure out if she can get back to the wilderness, the place that feels like home to her. Where does she really belong? These are the big kind of themes of the second book, The Wild Robot Escapes. And so, of course, we're really hoping, even Chris Sanders, the director, and Jeff Hermann, the producer, are hoping that they'll get the green light to make the second movie, because I think they want to explore a lot of those juicy subjects in the film.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to happen. Like everybody I know talks about this movie. It was funny. We watched it for the 4th time as a family on Saturday. And my daughter, my 13-year-old, got a text from her friend. Hey, you want to go see The Wild Robot with me on Sunday for the second time? And so she went and saw it 2 days in a row. Like
Oh, wow.
people love this movie. So, and love this story. Schools are sending, I mean, both my kids came home with the book to read. So,
That's awesome.
I
Yeah.
think I'm
Yeah.
got my fingers crossed that.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it'll probably happen, but it's a business, filmmaking. This is new to me. Publishing, I know inside and out, but the movies is a kind of a different animal. So we'll see. But I think there's enough love for the story, and Chris and Jeff are so good at what they do. If they want a movie to happen, it's kind of hard to imagine them getting turned down. So let's hope for the best.
Yes, amazing. Well, thank you so much and congratulations. And I'm hoping to see this get nominated. I think it will. Perfect. So. Well,
Yeah.
thank you both so much and congratulations on all the well-deserved success that this movie has had.
Oh, thank you so much.
I mean, this movie is just, it's beautiful. I've seen it 3 times so far, and I every time, like as a mom, there's so many moments where I cry. I just really resonated with this film. But for you guys, what was it like? Is there any way you relate to this movie, and why did you feel like it needed to be made?
You start.
Oh,
You jump there. I want to jump over the rest of you. Oh, no.
Well, I mean, I think it's all the things that everyone's reacting to, right? And we reacted to as well. And the book, I think, upon first read, for a lot of us, conveyed those same reactions, which is, this is such a unique story that has so many themes that are so relatable to so many of us. I think we all have felt like outsiders at different points in our life, and we all have family connections that I think this story kind of speaks to. But there's also all the elements of kindness and empathy and community and becoming a better version of yourself by kind of overcoming your pre-programmed instincts. I think all of that resonated with us and made this movie so extra special. And then, you know, it has a sci-fi element, which I think we all find attractive. It's got animals being animals, which we love, and it has all these other exciting parts of what we love about movies. You know, it's funny, it's scary, it's emotional. So to get all of that in one package for us is kind of rare. And so we all jumped at the chance to be able to tell this story.
Yeah. I mean, the one shot, I've got to ask you guys about nailing this down because it is perfection when she is running after. I mean, I can't even talk about it or I'm going to start to cry because like, you know, my kids are 11 and 13 and it's like, you have to let them go sometimes. And it is very difficult, but between the score, the look, like that moment, can you talk about nailing that shot down?
Are you talking about when after he disappears over the trees, but then she runs
Yes.
through? Yeah. A lot of that comes from just like as I write these things, I listen to music, and there's always some I don't write without music. So as I found a particular piece of music that was motivating for me for that particular moment in the film, and I just kept running it over and over in my head and trying to get the characters to do what they would really do. And I think it was important that Roz is developing as a character, even though she doesn't, I don't think, notice. She's becoming more, I mean, for lack of a better term, human. And she's becoming more emotionally dimensional. And she's been improvising this whole thing, which is what you have to do as a parent. So there's a lot of relatability there. But it wasn't until that moment that I realized that she should do something impetuous. That once he disappears, without any good reason, she just suddenly starts running because she's got to see him one more time, which is a very human thing to do. And then likewise, when she reaches the edge of the cliff, I thought, well, if Longneck looked back and saw this robot, if he saw Roz out there, he would understand the level of pain that she was in, and he would turn back and do his best to give her one last glimpse before they took off. So that, I think that compounding, like one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, is one of the reasons I think that this moment is working as it does, because it's always topping itself and it's always unfolding. So it's hard to keep that moment from stopping. You don't want it to stop. So I think, and of course, a huge component of this was Kris Bowers. He understood from the very beginning that he was going to be the biggest voice in this film, and no moment is a better one to talk about than that particular sequence. In fact, while he was working on that bit, we were encouraging him to stop looking at the visuals at a certain point and just finish the score. Make this score as big and emotional as it wants to be. Don't limit it in any sort of way. And then we'll come back and we'll match our visuals to what you created.
Oh,
And also that, just real quick to tack onto that, the moment you're describing was boarded by Kris on the first pass and was done very early in the process. And so Kris's, though the shot design that Kris did on that pass is the shot structure of the sequence as you see it today, and that kind of really helped establish the scope and scale of the cinematography for the film as well.
Yeah, well, like speaking of the visuals, this movie is gorgeous. I love how unique it is. I feel like we haven't seen an animated film that looks like this before. So can you talk about that?
The look of this film is one of the huge components in the way that people, I think, are relating to it. It was very important for us that we create a rather sophisticated look. I think because of the nature of the characters and the nature of the story, it was going to be very available for kids. Kids were going to be they were going to gravitate towards this. I wanted to be sure that adults saw this the way that I was seeing it, because there are so many things about this that anybody can relate to. It's a film absolutely for every single person that walks in, whether they have a kid with them or not. So the level of sophistication, there's a relation to that and this story as I think Bambi had to its story. Bambi was this sweet, sweet, innocent story that had a lot of emotional power in its core, and they treated it very seriously with their visuals. So we were going to do likewise with this. So DreamWorks had made some huge advances visually with Bad Guys and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and getting away from that CG look that we were habituated to. Technologically, we were locked to it, and to a certain level of realism. So to get away from that with this film and push, we leveraged those two other films to get a much softer style on this one, and to actually get enough technology that we were able to paint our backgrounds dimensionally. So our matte painters did the skies, but they also did the midground, and they also created the foreground, which is one of the reasons that this whole thing is as immersive and beguiling as it is. And this is just one of the lucky things that happened. This film was in the right place at the right time with all the right people. It actually sat in development for about 4 years before they started making the film.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. So those 4 years were critical in DreamWorks advancing its technology so that, again, like it dropped into production exactly when it needed to.
Yeah, because we couldn't have made this movie in this way 5 years ago.
Yeah.
The technology wasn't ready.
That's so crazy to think about, just literally right place, right time, like, and I'll say, so my kids read the book in school. So they were very excited for this. And then they're 11 and 13, and we just all cried, sobbed like babies watching watching this. And then I wanted to let you guys know too, at Fantastic Fest, this was huge. They played this at Fantastic Fest, which is usually, such a genre festival. Walking out, so many people were sobbing. I had already seen it, but I saw it again. And it just really resonated with everybody. So I wanted to pass that on to you guys, because it's such a brilliant movie. Now, I didn't realize, because my kids read the book, there's 3 books.
There are 3 books.
So 3.
This movie is only book 1.
Yeah, so I know there's going to be a second one.
We're all think. I think we all. I mean, we'll say this. We're positioned. We did end this book true to where the first book in the series ended. So, in success, we could do that.
So we can just have all 3 then.
It's possible.
All goes well.
Yeah.
I hope so. And then final question. Let's say somebody missed the Wild Robot for some reason. They don't even know it exists. What would you say to them to get them to check out this film?
That is a good question. I always have pushed the narrative that if you see this, especially if you still have an opportunity to see this in the theater, don't hesitate. The scale of the visuals and the scale of Kris's score works the very, very, very best on a giant screen with giant speakers. But no matter what, I think the nature of this movie is quite unusual, and it actually, it actually exceeds my ability to really describe it very well, because we all have seen it, so we know, like, at its core how powerful this story is that Peter Brown created. So I think that, like, people would see something if they get the chance to see this in whatever form, they will be very glad they did. It's I think the kind of film that can actually change your life to some degree.
And I think, sometimes animation unfairly gets categorized as something that's strictly for children. This is not, and we feel that this movie is for children, but it is for adults. It is for everyone. We made it as a movie, not as an animated movie. And that's what, if there's a message to put out there to people that haven't seen it yet, maybe I'd throw that out there as well.
Yeah, like I said, I saw it 3 times in the theater. I can't wait to watch it repeatedly at home. It's easily one of my favorites of the year. Like, it's not even a question. So, and I think the cast is incredible. Just phenomenal job, guys. And thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Kris, thank you so much for taking the time. I am obsessed with this movie. I watched it for the 4th time this weekend. It's so good. And, like, I'm going to dive right into it. When I talked to Kris Sanders, I said, as a mom, the one part I have a hard time even talking about it without crying is the migration scene when she goes running after him. I've got to know how you found. I mean, that feels like that's the core of this, and the score has so much to do with that. Can you talk about finding that?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, I feel like it's something I wanted to tackle pretty early. It's actually the first theme that I wrote for the movie, and the first piece of music I wrote, like, for the movie properly. It really is just kind of trying to think about all those emotions, like you were saying, like, for you as a mom and, like, as a parent. I think about both my wife and I talking about our experiences as parents. Like, my daughter was only about 7 or 8 months old when I started writing that piece of music. She was 5 months old when I had the first meeting for this project, and so many of those emotions were just, like, bursting out of us at that stage where you just have no idea how to articulate, like, how much you love this human being, and, like, the idea of sending them off into the world and trusting the world with this human that you've brought into the world and helped shape is just so profound. Like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it.
I know.
I think a lot of it, honestly, for me is like just getting to this place emotionally. It's almost like method acting. It's like getting to this place emotionally and then like going and playing piano and just like trying to find something that gets to that same feeling. And so that's how I found that theme was just like my first pass at it was not right. It was you know, it treated this idea of them saying goodbye with like a naive sweetness and like this kind of I thought about taking my daughter to college, and the way I envisioned that was like with like her turning back and saying goodbye and like waving and us like, you know, being so cute with each other. And I played that for Kris, and Kris was like, "That's not the right feeling for this moment." And we talked about what this moment actually feels like for Roz and Bright Bill, and that just sent me down an even more emotional path of like, man, you know, no matter what I do or how much I try, there's going to be so many times where I fail as a parent, and they're going to be. I think about my relationship with my parents. It's positive, but at the same time, there's so many things that I'm still struggling to like accept about them. So many things that like I have to, you know, forgive them for, and that there's inevitably going to be something like that with me and my daughter. And so thinking about the ways that I'm going to fail or let her down, and the imperfect aspect of being a parent, I think was definitely also an emotional wave that contributed to writing this thing that had that, you know, balance that scene needed.
Yeah. Well, your daughter's still young. Mine are 11 and 13. My girls are 11 and 13. So
Oh, you're in the heat of like that's
yeah, I was gonna say it gets harder. That's for
Oh man.
sure.
Yeah.
So that moment for me was very like, oh yeah, this is, you know, because there's days where my kids won't talk to me for like a week, and I'm like, guys, let's get
Wow.
over this hurdle. You know, it happens. It happens. So you really
Yeah.
capture that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And then I want to talk too about like the evolution of Roz throughout the movie. Now, Lupita does a fantastic job with her voice, but there's also that evolution in the score, I feel like, as well, to really take it from the like roboticness to a more human. So, can you talk about that evolution?
Yeah, totally. I appreciate that. I mean, you know, a big part of my approach to writing themes is seeing how they have malleability beyond the first iteration of them or the most prominent iteration of them. And like the first time I wrote Roz's theme was for her kind of a commercial music when she turns on in the beginning of the movie, and she keeps, you know, trying to find her customer essentially. And with that, I was really inspired by, you know, like futuristic music and like looking at, you know, infomercials about the future and like synthesizers and all these things, and like it has a very like music that sounds like processing underneath this strong melody. And to me, when you have a very strong melody, you can play that in iteration, whether it's like just piano or with this huge orchestra, and it carries. And so wanting to have that melody felt important to me, so that the development of her could be handled more in the way that melody is presented. So the first time we hear it, it's like got a lot of synths and these like arpeggios and like all this stuff that feels like computery. And then as it develops and as she develops, you have moments like the truth scene where it's like very, very simple, sweet piano, and it's been like slightly reharmonized. So now that it feels like a little bit more open and warm, warm has warmth to it. So you know, it was really just a matter of like thinking about how to involve synths and orchestration and like the approach to it and the production of it, and how that develops over the course of it while keeping her melody the same, because she's still, you know, Roz at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh man, this movie is just so special. And I love the sci-fi aspect of it too. You know, we have that moment where she goes to where she's from basically, right? And like, you know, towards the end, I guess I can talk spoilers. I'm like trying to not, but I'm like people will have seen it by now. I'm like at the end when, but can you talk about like that part of it too? Just really bringing in, you know, Bright Bill looking for her at the end and
Yeah, I mean, to me, that was like a moment where I knew that we had something special thematically, where like I'm always looking for moments where I'm viscerally reacting to something, where like I'm not telling myself to feel something, I just happen to feel something. And like that's when I feel like art is the most pure, is like when I can listen to something even that I created or I'm a part of creating, and like it makes me feel something. That's why improvisation is a big thing for me, because it's like getting there without me trying to like force it. Um,
Mhm.
and so I remember working on that sequence, and when Fink is reading the story, I was like, okay, well, I'll start with like a loose reference to the bedtime story because it feels like similar to that. So it starts with a similar kind of feeling as that moment. But then I was like, well, we have to try to figure out how to make that I could use a boost cue, the main theme come in as soon as he pops his head out and see if that's going to work. And I remember getting to that point and writing everything up until that point and then being like, okay, here's the test. And like starting to write that, bring back that I could use a boost ostinato that comes in there. And I felt like this like excitement and all these feelings. And so trusting that visceral response, I think is something that always makes me feel like I'm onto the right track. And that was a big moment there, was like knowing I needed to recall that cue, not a little bit more specifically. Like it's not an exact music edit, like reproduction of it, but it's like a very clear, like this is the moment that we're referencing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole film is gorgeous. I cry every time I watch it, multiple times throughout it. My kids and I were, holding each other this weekend. The moment when Fink's like, you know, what am I going to do if I have to tell you something?
Yeah, you're not there. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, and the score really has so much to do with why this really hits home and really hits emotionally. So thank you so much for your work on this, and congratulations on all the love it's receiving.
You really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for the questions.